Please be seated. The lectionary that we use for our Sunday Masses is on a 3-year cycle. I'm not sure if you know that. It doesn't have all of the Bible scriptures in it, but it has selections from most of the Bible. And so every 3 years, we hear the same stories repeated in the same order, more or less. And so every 3 years, we get what I call the Eucharistic teaching. It goes on in the summertime, and it goes on for 5 weeks. This is what you heard last week, which was the feeding of the 5,000, and then Jesus talking about the bread of life, and then people reacting. Spoiler alert here, but I think you guys know where this is going, right? They react to the bread of life, and then the disciples leave. Well, where to? Are you going as well? This is where it's going. I share it with you because it's a real challenge when you're by yourself. When I was a younger priest, I didn't always see this coming. And so you give your big Eucharistic homily, and the first one, you got like 4 more weeks of this, right? So you got to kind of save your powder for later. I think Deacon Mark did a nice job tying it into the Eucharist last Sunday. And I want to continue that. But Father John will be back, and he'll continue it next week. And we're going to be in this for a little while. But can we ever have too much of the Eucharist? Amen? What I found in this is an interesting kind of juxtaposition. There's a fancy word. You see, for us, it's quite obvious what Christ is talking about. But we've had 2,000 years of mystics and saints and liturgies and people doing adoration and the good sisters teaching us about making your first communion, right? All those things that they taught us. So for us, this is very obvious. The Lord is talking about the Eucharist. But in the moment that he's giving this gospel, remember, this is pre-passion. For the people at that time, to find food and shelter was most of what they did. Now, shelter was difficult, but at least in that part, it's a warm part of the world. But food was a constant battle. Remember, no electricity. No freezers, no restaurants. Like, you were really limited. You had to hold on to, prepare, and serve food. It was a lot of their work. So the notion for them of someone who could feed them daily without work, it was beyond comprehension. That was last week's miracle. Imagine. Like, it really is. I was starting to think of examples of this, and I'm sorry I'm going to use a Star Trek episode kind of analogy, but do you know the replicators, those things, how they get food on Star Trek? So when Captain Picard would go, Earl Grey, hot, right? He would serve up a cup of tea, and it was, boom, it was there. It was like that. They would be absolutely fascinated. Imagine. We could have food every day. We wouldn't have to work for it. That's amazing. But what Jesus is talking about is not that, it's the Eucharist, which is going to be completely against the kosher laws and the notion of human flesh, and they can't understand it. And in fairness, it hasn't even happened yet. He's going to institute it at the Last Supper, and it's really only going to occur on the cross. That's where the first Mass and only Mass was celebrated. And we draw from that now. So that they don't understand it, it's a little bit understandable. But we have a situation here in the gospel. It's a little bit like one of those movies where we as the audience know something that the characters in the movie don't know. Does that make any sense to you? It's like we know that the hero is hiding in the closet and the zombies are coming in. Are they going to open the closet? They're not going to open the closet. We know he's in the closet. Hopefully the zombies don't know he's in the closet. And it creates that tension in the scene. We know this is Eucharistic, but the people who are experiencing it have no idea what he's talking about. And that's the theme that I wanted to draw from, because I kind of asked myself, I was praying about this morning, have I ever been in a situation in my life with that juxtaposition where I just didn't get it? And what I was thinking about was way back at the very beginning when I first made a bit of an effort. I thought about being a priest, and I wasn't really sure, and I had a brother who was in the seminary, and so that took a little while to sort itself out. And I'd gone to a priest, and I talked to him about it, and I think he kind of surprised him. Actually almost choked on his lunch. He knew me in high school. If he knew me in high school, I don't think I was really picked as the guy who was going to go on to do this, so fair enough. But he sent me to a charismatic prayer group. He said, look, I got to go back to where I live, but in Kingston, there's this group of people, they're good friends of mine. Why don't you go there and learn how to pray with them? This is like mid-'80s. And so I went to this prayer meeting. And to be honest with you, I didn't like it. Like, I was not always this well-oiled spiritual machine that stands before you, right? And I was basically living in an 80s beer commercial. That's about where I was. So I show up, and it's very intimate. It's a very little chapel in one of the high schools, and people are singing, and they're praying, and they're annoyingly happy. They obviously care for each other very deeply. They're so positive. It drove me crazy. But I have to admit, I saw a spark of life in their eyes. And I wasn't so dead in my own life that I thought, you know what, I want that spark. I want that for myself. It's greed. Funny how you start off a spiritual conversion with greed, but I wanted that spark for myself. And I was praying about this morning, if I was really honest, what I wanted to find a way to get the spark without doing the work. That's what I wanted. I wanted to find a way to be joyful and happy like them, but not change my life or learn to pray or do any of that stuff. Of course, it doesn't work. And that's the juxtaposition. You see, we have to do the work. There's really only two ways to manage this. Either we're proactive and we do the things the Lord's been asking us to do. We establish a prayer life. We come to the Eucharist. We do our prayers. We treat people with dignity. We learn about our faith. That's one way to do it. Either we do the work or the world's going to work us. And that can be done, actually. I think if you just, world will teach you most of these lessons if you're open and you accept it on its terms. And maybe that's a combination of both, that we need to be proactive in what we do and accept what happens to us and experience it in kind of what the Lord's trying to teach us. We put those two together, we can understand what this is us. This is life. It's messy, it's difficult, it's confusing, but it's beautiful, it's edifying, and it changes people. Now, there's a lot more we can say about the Eucharist, but it's Saturday night, it's kind of warm, and you got 4 more weeks of this, right? So I don't need to say it all tonight, but that's what I want you to go home with. Am I going to do this and reach out and make it happen and give God permission? Or I simply want to be aware enough of life that I'll accept it on its own terms and let it teach me. But wherever you brought tonight, let's put it here on the altar. As Deacon Mark said, let's bring that to Christ and know that Christ is bringing to you his very self. We know how the story ends. I don't have to teach you everything about the Eucharist tonight because you're going to spend eternity in front of the Eucharist celebrating with God. That's my prayer. Amen? Amen.